I'm sure you've noticed, now that you've been here for a couple of days, how when people talk to you about their journeys, probably in every journey you've heard, something inside it resonates with you. Perhaps it echoes a piece of your past, or maybe it's talking about where you're wanting to go. But always, one person's journey is actually a journey that belongs to all of us. And so I'm going to share this journey with you, and I'd like to know where it resonates with you. You see, I remember a childhood of the most extreme shyness. I was the little introverted girl that sat in the back of the classroom and didn't want to put her hand up. I was always the one that was sitting terrified that I wouldn't be picked, that I wouldn't have somebody to hang out with at break. I know what it feels like to sit on the outside looking in and wondering how to belong. And I didn't feel like I was on the outside looking in because I'd been rejected or anything like that. It was just I didn't actually know how to fit in. And unfortunately now, as a psychologist, I see this very often with adults who come to me, very confident, respected adults, who will sit there with tears running down their faces while they talk to me about a lifetime of never actually belonging. Now, I was an introvert and I was shy, but my goodness me, did I have dreams. And they seemed so at odds with the person that I was, unless I went through a complete change of personality and actually became one of these extroverts that was out there and at 'em and ready to actually sort of fight my corner and reap the rewards. I couldn't ever figure out how these dreams would ever become my reality. But they kept beating inside me like a heartbeat. You see, my childhood circumstances weren't really doing me any favors. I had a wonderful, wonderful childhood. I was brought up in a tiny little village in KwaZulu-Natal in South Africa. A beautiful little place, the perfect place for a childhood. We were a close little family. You knew everybody, so all your friends were good friends. There was lots of open space that you could go out and play. But it wasn't doing me a whole lot of good in developing social skills. I then had a whole lot of traumatic events happen to me, quite unexpectedly, really sideswiped that childhood. Suddenly I was in a place where all I felt was fear. It seemed to shadow me everywhere that I went. My family hit a crisis, and the solution to the crisis was to move to Johannesburg, the big city. And that fear that moved with me was so great that even at that stage, I remember thinking, I have got to be bigger than this fear. Because if I don't conquer it, this fear could cost me my life. Perhaps not physically, but it's certainly going to give me the difference between just being alive and actually living a life. Fear and success don't sit comfortably together. Now, I had been going to a tiny little village school run literally in huts, and now suddenly I found myself in this huge, big, sprawling Jewish school in the suburbs of Johannesburg. It was religion I knew absolutely nothing about at the time. It was so different to me. And then blow me down, 2 years later, I was moved to a little convent run by nuns. And this juxtaposition of complete opposites still seems to rule my life. But the trouble was that there were always such different circumstances and different sets of people and different places that I always had to find a way to fit in with. I was always the outsider. And I was so shy. How was I going to make this happen? Now, one of the people, very influential and instrumental people in my life is my dad. And my dad was a bit of an anathema to me because he spoke for a living. Every time you turned on the television or you'd go to the theatre, there he would be. He'd be running seminars and he'd been running conferences. And I used to look at him and think, how did you ever produce a daughter like me? How did it happen? And I was proud of him, but I was fascinated by him. I thought, why would somebody choose to go into a profession that leaves you so vulnerable, so open to ridicule and exposure? where you're only ever as good as your last performance. Who would choose that? And more to the point, why? Why did he do that? And I used to make it a weekly declaration just about that my life was going to be 150% different to my dad's life. But then there's a funny thing, that whole nature versus nurture. My nature kept wanting to run away and hide, but somehow that nurturing just kept nudging me forward and nudging me forward. I discovered pretty early on that even when I felt like I was going to be sick, I was so nervous, that even when I did my little class speeches, people, for some reason, actually seemed to enjoy listening to me. I remember a teacher of mine when I was about 10 saying to me, "Oh, Jane, I'm sure I'm going to hear your voice for years after you've walked out of these school gates. You're a natural." And I'm thinking, "Oh, you have actually got to be joking." But something happened when I spoke. And something happened every time I moved from one completely different situation to another. I discovered that if you were prepared to stand up and speak, people actually got to know who you were. They started to recognize you. And it made that whole integration process that I dreaded so much that much easier. And I almost made a deal in my head. I thought, well, is it worth this moment of unbelievable fear for the long-term benefit of actually just fitting in quicker? That's kind of where my head went. And by the time I was in my final year of secondary school, matric, I was in everything that made a noise. I was head of the speech society, I was in the debating society, I was in choir, I was in the drama club. I'd figured out that my school thought I was great. I was winning them awards and cups, and I didn't even have to get all hot and sweaty on the sports field. I didn't have to get clobbered across the knees with a hockey stick. It was absolutely brilliant. I just had to open my mouth and talk. And everybody who knows me will tell you I'm pretty good at doing that, actually. So this had actually become the linchpin of my schooling, much to my huge surprise. And the trouble was, when I left school and went into my world, it stopped. Have you ever known that you're really good at something and you just can't quite figure out how to fit it into your life? Or felt so frustrated and bored with what you're doing because you know there's something else that lights the fire inside of you? And for me, that thing was speaking. And I'd have the school ask me to come back and speak at the odd event, and friends asking me to speak at their weddings and things like that, but it just wasn't kind of doing it for me. And of course, you know, these entry-level jobs that we all start with, there's no opportunity to talk and, you know, do anything with any sort of expertise and authority. And so it was a very uncomfortable time for me. And then I exacerbated that situation by marrying a man who wanted to silence my voice altogether. He didn't like anything that I said. He would belittle me. He would tell me how useless and stupid I was, what a complete waste of space I was. And I remember one night lying in bed, aching from head to foot after a particularly bad day together. And I realized something. I couldn't compete with him physically. My body was always going to be smaller than his. But the contents of my mind were mine to keep. Nobody else could get in there unless I gave them permission. And that was a turning point in my life going forward. Because I don't know if I was doing it as an escape from my reality, but I learnt voraciously. I have got 3 doctorates. I read, I love observing people. I'm very aware of the opportunities around me to gather up knowledge. And so I knew a couple of things. I knew, number 1, that I had some really, really good thoughts and knowledge in my head. And number 2, I had some pretty good life experience as well. And all of that stuff was actually worth sharing with other people. Now, I know Andy's mentioned it, and the person that particularly sat down and spoke to me about this was the golfer, Gary Player, very famous South African golfer, who said to me, "Jane, just remember, good luck happens when preparation meets opportunity." Now, I loved speaking in public. And as Andy has said several times, you've got to be prepared all the time. And you are. You automatically are. When you're confident that you've got decent subject matter, whatever the subject is, and when you know that you've got the confidence to get up and speak, you will. And what started to happen was, it's like you've set your sails to the wind, and now the wind is filling your sails. And all sorts of things started happening. By my late 20s, I was running youth leadership courses. I was running business training programs. I was doing coaching and mentoring. I started appearing on television. Slowly, slowly, slowly. It was like Topsy. It just grew and grew and grew. Like every single one of you, my life's had its incredible highs, but my goodness me, it's had suicidal lows. But I know a few things. Firstly, I've got a quarter of a century of really solid life experience. I've got really good subject matter in my head, and I'm lucky enough to be considered an industry expert in things that I love speaking about anyway and talking about anyway. How brilliant to actually have people come and pay to watch you and listen to what you say. My family don't, for goodness sake. I need people like you. And so I had all of that. And then I'd had all the lows that happened in my life. I lost my brother, who was shot dead in an armed robbery just a couple of weeks after his 21st birthday. I watched my dad go through the most incredible suffering before his death a couple of years ago. I've lost babies. I've been the victim of violent crime more times than I care to remember. I've had life-threatening illnesses. All sorts of things. We've all had different things happen to us. But those things, when you come through them and have faced the fear that they cause you, the strength that you get from those is absolutely incredible. Now I miss my dad and I miss my brother every single day of my life. But it was actually the process of losing them that made me realize how incredibly precious and fragile life is. And that not one of us has got the right to abuse it and to waste it. And my own scars from my own brushes with death, I've been asked on several occasions whether I've ever considered plastic surgery. But no, because what those scars remind me every time I look in the mirror is that I'm very much alive. And as long as you're alive, you can live. And I also know something else. You don't actually die if what you've done during the course of your life is powerful enough to leave something behind. If you've left behind a positive influence in your life, then you've lived a life that you can be so proud of living. And I've had the most beautiful highs. I'm a mother of beautiful children. I'm delighted to say, in a happy marriage. I've had international work opportunities, brilliant exposure, brilliant experiences. All of those things I can bring to the party. And everything that I've learned from all the jobs I've done well, all the jobs I've done badly, all the things I've done right, all the things I've done wrong. The fact that people are prepared to pay all of us to find out things that we already know and they still have to learn, it's absolutely priceless. So what lights your fire? What's your passion? What is it that gets you out of bed every morning? And are you ready to share it? Because to me, knowledge unused is a crime, but knowledge shared is the most incredible gift. Are you ready to give that gift to others? Now, I know I'm a little bit different because for me, speaking came first and life came second. And I fully understand that for most people it's the other way around. But speaking has turned out to be the linchpin that holds all the various events in my life together and gives them sense. I know that speaking and living make really good bedfellows. And being a professional speaker is the best business opportunity you will ever have, whatever line of business you go into. And do you know what every single one of you can go home tonight realizing? You've all chosen to take that journey and give yourself that gift. And I'm going to hand you back to Andy, who's going to carry on shaping you into your expert in your field. Thank you.